Hi, this is Andrew again. I serve as one of the spokespersons for Nehemiah Reset. Today, a few days after the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, I want to highlight how the issue of free speech was handled by the left and the right in recent years. The issue of free speech has always been a contentious one in American society, with debates raging on the limits and boundaries of what can and cannot be said. In recent years, two high-profile incidents have highlighted the stark contrast in how the left and the right approach the concept of free speech: the death of George Floyd and the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. In this video, we will delve into the responses from the left and the right to these two incidents, examining their messaging, tactics, and impact on public discourse. We will provide a common-sense perspective on how the issue of freedom of speech was handled in both cases, analyzing the key differences between the two sides and the broader societal implications of their approaches. First, let's start with the death of George Floyd and the left's response. The death of George Floyd at the hands of police officers in Minneapolis in May 2020 sparked a wave of protests and demonstrations across the country, with the Black Lives Matter movement at the forefront of calls for justice and police reform. The left's response to Floyd's death was characterized by a focus on racial justice, systemic racism, and police brutality. The left emphasized the importance of allowing marginalized voices to be heard and giving a platform to those who have been historically oppressed. Calls for defunding the police and dismantling systemic racism became central to the messaging of the movement, with a focus on creating a more equitable society for all. Tactics employed by the left included violent protests, marches, and demonstrations, as well as social media campaigns and advocacy work. The left used platforms like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to amplify their message and mobilize support for their cause. They also employed large-scale, dangerous protests with mass protesters who set fires in our cities across the country. The impact of the left's response to George Floyd's death was significant, sparking a national conversation on race, policing, and social justice. Calls for reform and change were heard across the political spectrum, with many politicians, celebrities, and public figures voicing their support for the Black Lives Matter movement. However, the damage that was done as a result of these protests was in the millions of dollars. Many cities experienced riots and violent damage to buildings, cars, and in some cases injury to people. The left's approach to free speech in response to George Floyd's death was characterized by a focus on amplifying marginalized voices, highlighting systemic injustices, and calling for concrete policy changes. The movement sought to create a more inclusive and just society, where all individuals could exercise their right to free speech without fear of retribution or harm. Yet the tools that they used to try to change our society used many of the tactics that they sought to eliminate. For example, they preached racism, yet employed the concept of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as one of the ways that we could correct racism in America. Unfortunately, DEI promotes racism, it doesn't correct it. Over the last few years, since it has been employed, we see the damage that it has done to our society. Now, let's look at the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the right's response to this murder. In contrast, the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk in October 2021 sparked a very different response from the right. Kirk, known for his conservative views, was murdered by a young person at an event in Utah. The right's response to Kirk's murder was marked by outrage, condemnation of political violence, and calls for justice. Conservative commentators and politicians condemned the attack, with many attributing it to the increasing polarization and hostility in American society. They pointed out that most of the recent murders of political figures were conservatives, and most of the murderers were young people indoctrinated in our school systems. Tactics employed by the right included press conferences, statements, and social media campaigns denouncing the violence and calling for unity. The right emphasized the need for civil discourse, respect for differing viewpoints, and a commitment to upholding freedom of speech for all individuals, regardless of their beliefs. The impact of the right's response to Charlie Kirk's murder, we hope, will lead to a renewed focus on the importance of protecting free speech and promoting a culture of tolerance and understanding. The incidents serve as a stark reminder of the dangers of political violence and the need for respectful dialogue and debate. What are the key differences and implications of the different approaches to these violent acts? The responses from the left and the right to George Floyd's death and Charlie Kirk's murder highlight key differences in their approaches to free speech. The left focused on amplifying marginalized voices, advocating for social justice, calling for systemic change by using more violence to convince people, while the right emphasized the importance of civil discourse, respect for differing viewpoints, and protection of freedom of speech to talk about the need for free speech. These contrasting approaches have broader societal implications, shaping the way in which public discourse is conducted and the extent to which individuals feel able to express their opinions without fear of retribution. The left's focus on using riots and violence as a response to the George Floyd death creates more division and more violence rather than solving what they perceive as the problem of the need for a more inclusive and equitable society, where all individuals have the right to be heard and respected. On the other hand, the right's emphasis on civil discourse, respect for differing viewpoints, and protection of freedom of speech is crucial in maintaining a healthy democratic society where individuals can engage in respectful dialogue and debate. The right's response to Charlie Kirk's murder serves as a reminder of the importance of upholding these values in the face of political violence and extremism. Only time will tell if the approach advocated by the right will have any impact on free speech in America. In conclusion, the responses from the left and the right to George Floyd's death and Charlie Kirk's murder highlight the divergent approaches to free speech taken by each side. While the left focused on amplifying marginalized voices and advocating for social justice through the use of demonstrations, violent protests, and destruction of property, the right emphasized civil discourse, respect for differing viewpoints, and protection of freedom of speech. Let's hope public support and our media will emphasize the importance of civil discourse and the need for tolerance in these different views. We can only pray that God will influence the hearts of both sides to understand that there are different views and violent acts will not win over the argument to one side or the other. We also need to pray that our news media will help dampen the rhetoric of both sides so that the difference of opinions can be argued in a civil manner. Thanks again for watching this video on the differences between how the left handled the death of George Floyd and how the right is handling the death of Charlie Kirk. I hope it gives you some ideas on how we need to handle these issues in the future. Violence does nothing to solve the problem. It only makes it worse. We need to get back to having a civil discussion on differences of opinion on the key issues of today. To learn more about this topic and more, visit our website at nehemiahreset.org or our rumble.com channel. Hi, this is Daniel again. The previous video was sponsored by Nehemiah Reset, a 501c3 Bible-believing organization. Our mission is to assist Christians in developing a stronger biblical worldview as it pertains to relevant cultural and biblical issues. We seek to inform Christ followers, equip them, and mobilize them into action to vote their biblical values and to actively engage in our culture locally and at the national level. We are committed to help Christians and non-believers to develop a better biblical worldview. Nehemiah Reset produces videos and ebooks to assist believers and explorers in developing a biblical worldview when it comes to cultural and biblical issues. We produce videos on key topics like public school indoctrination, the woke agenda, sex education, equity and inclusion, climate change, immigration, religious freedom, and lessons that can be learned from key subjects in the Bible. To learn more about Nehemiah Reset or to watch our latest videos, go to our website at nehemiahreset.org or our rumble.com channel. We produce new videos every week. To get a free weekly list of our latest videos, sign up for our weekly newsletter by signing up at nehemiahreset.org/email. You can support our website by liking our videos, subscribing to our channel, or providing donations to help us advertise for new subscribers. Thanks for your help in growing God's kingdom and bringing more people to Christ. Thank you for your support and help. Have a great day.